The morning of Calvin's funeral, I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, adjusting the black Chanel suit he'd bought me for our 20th anniversary. My hands trembled as I fastened the pearl necklace, another gift, this one from our honeymoon in Tahiti. Every piece of jewelry, every designer dress in my closet, told the story of our life together. 25 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and a fashion empire we'd built from nothing. Now all I had were these remnants and memories. "Simone, the car's here," my eldest daughter, Sophia, called from downstairs. Her voice cracked with grief she was trying to hide for my sake. I took one last look at myself. Simone Cross, 45 years old, widow. The word felt foreign on my tongue, like trying to speak a language I'd never learned. Just a week ago, I was Simone Cross, wife of Calvin Cross, co-founder of Simone Wear's fashion house. We were the power couple everyone envied at charity galas and business conferences. Now I was half of nothing. The funeral was a blur of black umbrellas and whispered condolences. 500 people came to pay their respects to Calvin Cross, the man who'd revolutionized sustainable fashion manufacturing on the West Coast. Business partners, celebrities who wore our designs, employees who'd been with us since we operated out of our garage. They all came to say goodbye. But through it all, one face stood out in the crowd. Regina Holt, my best friend of 20 years, held my hand through the service. She'd been there for everything. My wedding, the birth of each of my children, the grand opening of our first boutique. When the priest spoke about Calvin's dedication to family, Regina squeezed my fingers so tight I thought they might break. "I'm here for you," she whispered during the eulogy. "Whatever you need." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. What I didn't notice then, what grief had blinded me to, was the way she kept glancing at our family lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, throughout the service. The way they exchanged knowing looks over my husband's casket. The way her son Adrian, who just turned 20, kept staring at Calvin's photo with an expression I couldn't quite place. At my husband's funeral, I was drowning in grief. But betrayal has a way of finding you when you're weakest. Days later, my best friend of 20 years looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Simone, my son is Calvin's child. Half of your fortune belongs to us." This story isn't about death. It's about betrayal, and how secrets buried with the coffin eventually claw their way back out. Let me take you back to the beginning, to help you understand the magnitude of what happened. Calvin and I met at a fashion trade show in Los Angeles in 1999. I was 20, fresh out of design school, showcasing my senior collection at a tiny booth I could barely afford. He was 27, already making waves in textile manufacturing with his innovative approach to sustainable fabrics. "Your designs are extraordinary," he'd said, examining a silk evening gown I'd hand-painted with Japanese cherry blossoms. "But your fabric choices are holding you back." Any other young designer might have been offended. I was intrigued. "Show me better options, then." He did. Over coffee that turned into dinner that turned into a walk along the Santa Monica Pier, Calvin Cross showed me a world of possibilities. Bamboo fibers that felt like cashmere. Recycled ocean plastics transformed into stunning textiles. Organic cotton that could be dyed with natural pigments to create colors I'd only dreamed of. "We could change the industry," he said as the sun set over the Pacific. "Your designs, my materials and manufacturing connections. We could build something revolutionary." We built more than a business. We built a life. Simone Wears, named for the first woman, the original fashion icon who made clothes from leaves, launched in 2001 from our converted garage in Pasadena. I designed. Calvin handled production and business development. We worked 18-hour days, survived on ramen and dreams, and slowly built our reputation. Regina came into our lives in 2004, when Simone Wares had grown enough to need a proper marketing director. She walked into our first real office, a cramped space above a dry cleaner, wearing a power suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her smile camera-ready. "I've been following your work," she announced, setting a portfolio on my desk. "You're good, but you could be great. I can make that happen." She wasn't wrong. Regina Holt had worked for major fashion houses in New York and Paris. Her connections were impeccable, her instincts sharp. Within 6 months of hiring her, Simone Wares had features in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Women's Wear Daily. Our sustainable evening wear line caught the attention of Hollywood stylists. Suddenly, actresses were wearing my designs on red carpets, and Calvin's innovative fabrics were the talk of Fashion Week. But Regina brought more than professional expertise into our lives. She became my closest friend, my confidant, the sister I'd never had. When I suffered a miscarriage before Sophia was born, Regina held me while I cried. When Calvin's father died suddenly, she organized the entire funeral so we could grieve. When our son Marcus was diagnosed with dyslexia, she found the best specialists in Los Angeles. "Family isn't always blood," she used to say, raising her wine glass during our weekly dinners. "Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand by you." The irony of those words haunts me now. Regina had Adrian when she was 25, 5 years before she joined Simone Wares. She never talked about his father, always brushing off questions with a bitter laugh and comments about worthless men who can't handle responsibility. I admired her strength, raising a son alone while building her career. Calvin and I became Adrian's unofficial aunt and uncle. He spent summers at our house, played with our children, called me Aunt Simone. Looking back, there were signs I should have seen. The way Calvin always made sure Adrian had the latest gaming systems, the same ones he bought our kids. The way he never missed one of Adrian's basketball games, even when he missed Marcus's soccer matches. The way Regina sometimes looked at Calvin during those family dinners, her eyes holding secrets I was too trusting to question. But I was busy building an empire, raising 3 children, being the perfect wife and business partner. Simone Wares grew from a garage startup to a $10 million company with boutiques in Los Angeles, New York, Miami, and San Francisco. We won awards for sustainable fashion, were featured in documentaries about ethical manufacturing. Calvin and I were invited to speak at conferences, to mentor young entrepreneurs. We were living our dream. The cracks started showing 2 years ago. Calvin began working late more often, taking business trips he was vague about. When I asked, he'd pull me close and say, "Just tying up loose ends, making sure everything's secure for our future." I thought he meant expansion plans for Simone Wares. Maybe a new line, international distribution. I never imagined he was planning for a future where he wasn't there. The heart attack took him at his desk on a Tuesday afternoon. His assistant found him slumped over quarterly reports, his hand still clutching his favorite Mont Blanc pen, the one I'd given him when we signed our first $1 million contract. The doctors said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. Small comfort when your world collapses in an instant. Regina was at my house within an hour of the call. She handled everything I couldn't, calling our children, notifying employees, dealing with the media who wanted statements about the fashion industry's loss. She slept in my guest room for 3 nights, making sure I ate, helping me choose Calvin's burial suit, holding my hand when I had to identify his body. "He loved you so much," she kept saying. "You were his everything." Another lie, perfectly delivered. The week after the funeral passed in a haze of sympathy cards and legal meetings. Mr. Caldwell, our family lawyer, assured me that Calvin's will was straightforward, everything to me and the children, as we'd discussed. The business would continue under my leadership, with provisions for our kids to inherit their shares when they turned 25. Calvin was very clear about his wishes, Mr. Caldwell said, his kind eyes full of sympathy. He wanted to ensure you and the children were protected. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of design sketches and fabric swatches. The employees at Simone Wares rallied around me, determined to honor Calvin's legacy. Orders continued to pour in. Life, somehow, continued. Then came Adrian's birthday invitation. It arrived on expensive cardstock, Regina's flowing handwriting in gold ink. You're invited to celebrate Adrian's 20th birthday. Saturday, 7 p.m. Your presence would mean the world to us both. I almost didn't go. The thought of celebrating anything felt wrong, disrespectful to Calvin's memory. But Regina called, insisting. Simone, your family. Adrian specifically asked if you'd come. He's been so affected by Calvin's death. You know how close they were. Please. We need you there. So I went, wearing a navy dress instead of black, my first small step away from morning clothes. The party was at Regina's house in Brentwood, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa she'd bought 5 years ago. I'd always wondered how she afforded it on a marketing director's salary, even a generous one. Another sign I'd missed. The house was full of Adrian's friends from USC, where he was studying business. Regina had spared no expense, catered food, a professional DJ, champagne flowing like water. Adrian hugged me when I arrived, his embrace lasting a beat too long. Thank you for coming, Aunt Simone, he said, and something in his voice made me look at him more closely. He'd always resembled Regina with his blonde hair and tall frame, but tonight, in the soft lighting, I saw something else. The way he gestured when he talked. The slight cleft in his chin. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. My heart began to race, but I pushed the thoughts away. Grief plays tricks on your mind, makes you see ghosts everywhere. Regina was the perfect hostess, gliding through the crowd in a designer dress I recognized from our spring collection, one I'd given her for Christmas. She kept refilling my champagne glass, introducing me to Adrian's friends, making sure I was never alone long enough for sadness to creep in. Isn't this wonderful? She said during a quiet moment on the terrace. Adrian's becoming such a remarkable young man. Calvin would be so proud. The way she said his name, casual, possessive, made something twist in my stomach. The party reached its peak around 9 o'clock. Regina clinked a knife against her champagne flute, calling for attention. The music stopped. Conversations died. Everyone turned to watch as she stood beside Adrian, her arm around his shoulders. 20 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the room, I was blessed with the greatest gift of my life. Adrian, you've grown into everything I dreamed you'd be. Smart, kind, ambitious. You have your father's drive and determination. She paused, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. And tonight, as you enter this new decade of your life, it's time you claimed your full inheritance. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Adrian looked confused, glancing between his mother and me. The other guests murmured, sensing drama but not understanding its source. Mom, Adrian said. What are you talking about? Regina's smile was triumphant. Simone, darling, could you join us for a moment? There's something we need to discuss. Privately. My legs felt like water as I followed them into Regina's home office. The room was all dark wood and leather, trying too hard to project power and success. Regina closed the door behind us, the click of the lock unnaturally loud. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. It wasn't a request. I remained standing. What is this about, Regina? She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. Her manicured nails, the same shade of red I'd been wearing for years, tapped against it rhythmically. Simone, she began, her voice different now. Harder, businesslike. We've been friends for so long. I've watched you build your perfect life, your perfect family, your perfect business. And I've been grateful for every moment of your friendship. Regina, but friends shouldn't keep secrets from each other, should they? She pulled papers from the envelope, spreading them on the desk. Calvin certainly kept his share. But death has a way of revealing truth. My eyes fell to the papers. Legal documents. Calvin's letterhead. And there, in my husband's distinctive handwriting, words that made the room spin. To Adrian Holt, my biological son. No. The word came out as a whisper. Regina's laugh was cold. Oh yes. 21 years ago, before you ever met him, Calvin and I had a brief affair. He was young, ambitious, not ready for fatherhood. He paid support secretly all these years. But he wanted more for Adrian. He wanted to make things right. Adrian stood frozen by the window, his face pale. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying, Regina continued, her eyes never leaving mine, that your Aunt Simone isn't really your aunt. She's your stepmother. And according to Calvin's will, his real will, half of Simone Ware's belongs to you. To us. The room tilted. I gripped the back of the chair, my knuckles white. 21 years ago. Calvin and I had been dating for 2 years then. We'd been talking about marriage, about building a future together. You're lying. But even as I said it, the pieces clicked into place. Calvin's special attention to Adrian. The business trips that coincided with Adrian's school events. The guilty look in my husband's eyes whenever Regina's name came up in conversation. Am I? Regina pushed the papers toward me. Look for yourself. Calvin updated his will 6 months ago. He knew his health was failing, the family history of heart disease. He wanted to ensure Adrian received his rightful inheritance. I picked up the documents with shaking hands. There it was, in black and white. Calvin's signature. Mr. Caldwell's witness seal. Provisions for Adrian to receive 50% of Calvin's shares in Simone Ware's, effectively giving him and Regina control of the company I'd built with my own hands. This can't be legal, I said. I'm his wife. We built this company together. You built it with Calvin's money, Regina corrected. His connections. His manufacturing expertise. And now his son deserves his share. Mom, stop. Adrian's voice cracked. This isn't right. Uncle Calvin. He stopped, running his hands through his hair. God, I can't even call him that anymore, can I? Regina turned to her son, her expression softening. Sweetheart, I know this is a shock. But your father wanted to provide for you. He wanted you to have what you deserve. By destroying Aunt Simone? Adrian's voice rose. By ruining her life a week after his funeral? I'm not ruining anything, Regina said smoothly. I'm simply claiming what's ours. Simone and I can run the company together. Or she can buy us out. Or... She smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. We can let the courts decide. Imagine the headlines. Fashion icon's secret love child. The real story behind Simone Ware's. Your choice, Simone. I stared at the woman I'd called my best friend for 2 decades. The woman who'd held my children as babies, who'd stood beside me at fashion shows and charity galas, who'd cried with me when Calvin's heart stopped beating. All those years, she'd been harboring this secret, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. She shrugged elegantly. "Calvin came to me 6 months ago. His health was declining. His conscience was heavy. He wanted to do right by Adrian before it was too late. I simply facilitated. You manipulated a dying man. I protected my son's interests." Her voice hardened. "Do you know what it was like? Watching you live the life that should have been mine? Watching Calvin shower your children with love while Adrian got secret checks and stolen afternoons? You had everything, Simone. The husband, the family, the business, the reputation. All I had was a secret that ate me alive for 20 years. So you waited," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You waited until he was gone, until I was broken with grief, to make your move. Timing is everything in business." She leaned back in her chair, supremely confident. "You taught me that." I looked at the papers again, forcing myself to read every line despite the tears blurring my vision. Calvin's will, naming Adrian as his son and heir. Financial documents showing years of payments to a trust in Adrian's name. Photos. God, there were photos. Calvin holding a baby Adrian. Calvin at a little league game I thought was a business trip. Calvin and Regina at a restaurant, her hand on his arm, both of them smiling at the camera. But as I read, something nagged at me. A phrase in the legal documents that seemed oddly specific. I read it again, then a third time, my heart beginning to race for a different reason. "You didn't read this carefully, did you?" I said quietly. Regina's smile faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" I held up the will, pointing to a paragraph near the bottom. "This section here. Calvin's provisions for Adrian. Did you actually read it, or were you too excited about the headline?" "Of course I read it. Adrian inherits 50% of Calvin's shares in Simone Wares." "Conditionally," I corrected. "Adrian inherits 50% of Calvin's shares if and only if, and I'm quoting here, my legitimate children fail to successfully maintain and grow Simone Wares' fashion house within 5 years of my death, as determined by the board of directors." The color drained from Regina's face. "What? Furthermore," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "any attempt to contest this will or bring litigation against my wife, Simone Cross, will result in the immediate forfeit of any claim to my estate." I looked up at her. "Calvin knew you, Regina. He knew exactly what you'd do. That's not what he told me." She snatched the papers from my hands, scanning them frantically. "He said Adrian would be taken care of." He did take care of Adrian," I said. "There's a trust fund. $2 million for his education and a start in life. Plus the payments Calvin already made over the years. But the company, the empire we built together, that was never yours to take." Adrian stepped forward, reading over his mother's shoulder. His face cycled through emotions: confusion, anger, disappointment. "Mom, is this true? Did you know about this condition?" Regina's hands shook as she set down the papers. "He promised me. When he came to update his will, he promised Adrian would inherit his share of the company." "Maybe he did," I said. "Or maybe you heard what you wanted to hear. Calvin was many things, but he wasn't a fool. He knew what Simone Wares meant to me, to our children. He wouldn't destroy that, not even for his guilt." "This isn't over," Regina hissed. "I'll contest it. I'll prove he wasn't in his right mind when he made these changes." Did you miss the part about litigation resulting in forfeiture? I pulled out my phone. Should I call Mr. Caldwell? I'm sure he'd be happy to explain the finer points of the will. After all, he was there when Calvin signed it. He can testify to Calvin's state of mind. Regina's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. You sanctimonious bitch. You always had everything handed to you. The perfect husband, the perfect life. Perfect. I laughed, the sound bitter in my throat. My husband had a 20-year affair. He had a child with my best friend. He lied to me every single day of our marriage. You think that's perfect? At least you had him. Regina's voice rose to a shout. At least you got to wake up beside him, build a life with him, have his name. All I got were stolen moments and secret payments. Do you know what it's like to watch the man you love marry someone else? To raise his child alone while he plays happy family with another woman. So you decided to wait until he was dead to get your revenge? I shook my head. That's not love, Regina. That's obsession. Adrian had backed away from both of us, his face a mask of disgust. 20 years, he said quietly. 20 years of lies. Both of you, all of you, lying to me. Sweetheart. Regina reached for him, but he jerked away. Don't. Just don't. He looked at me, his eyes, Calvin's eyes, I could see it now, full of pain. Did you know? All those times I called you Aunt Simone, did you know? No, I said firmly. I found out the same time you did. Tonight. He nodded slowly, then turned back to his mother. We're leaving. Now. Adrian, we need to discuss. Now, Mom. His voice was steel. Or I walk out of here alone and you never see me again. Regina's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. She gathered the papers with shaking hands, shoving them back into the envelope. As she stood, she looked at me one last time. This isn't over, she repeated. Yes, I said quietly. It is. I waited until they left the office before I allowed myself to sink into the chair. My legs shook, my hands trembled, but somewhere beneath the pain and betrayal, I felt something else. Relief. The truth, as ugly as it was, had finally surfaced. I sat there for long minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the party continuing outside. Regina's guests, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, still celebrating. I thought about Calvin, about our life together, about all the moments that now needed re-examining through the lens of this new truth. Had he ever loved me? Or was I just the safer choice, the woman who could help him build his empire while Regina remained his secret passion? I might never know. The dead take their truths with them, leaving the living to sort through the wreckage. Finally, I stood and made my way back to the party. The music had resumed. People were dancing, laughing, oblivious. I found my purse and headed for the door, needing to escape before anyone noticed my tear-stained face. Aunt Simone. I turned to find Adrian in the foyer, his jacket in his hand. I'm sorry, he said simply. For all of it. For what my mother did. For what Calvin, my father, did. For existing. Don't. I touched his arm gently. None of this is your fault. You're as much a victim as anyone. He laughed bitterly. A victim with a $2 million trust fund. Blood money, I said. That's what it feels like, doesn't it? Payment for staying quiet, for not existing too loudly. His eyes widened at my understanding. Yeah, exactly. We stood there for a moment, two people caught in the wreckage of other people's choices. Then Adrian asked, "What happens now?" I don't know, I admitted. I go home. I run my company. I raise my children. I try to figure out how to grieve a man who never really existed. At least, not the version I thought I knew. And my mother? I considered the question. Your mother made her choices. She'll have to live with the consequences. She won't give up, he warned. She's been planning this too long. Maybe. But the law is clear. And more importantly, I'm done being anyone's victim, including hers. Adrian nodded, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief hug. For what it's worth, you were the best aunt a kid could have, even if it was all built on lies. I drove home in silence, my mind racing through 25 years of memories, searching for signs I'd missed. Calvin working late. Regina always available to help with the kids. The way they'd sometimes finish each other's sentences at company meetings. How blind had I been? Or how willfully ignorant? My children were waiting when I got home. Sophia, Marcus, and Lily sat in the living room, their faces grave. Someone had called them, Mr. Caldwell, probably, doing damage control. Mom. Sophia stood as I entered. Is it true? I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Yes. That bitch, Marcus spat. Regina was here last week, crying at Dad's funeral, and the whole time she was planning this? Language, I said automatically, then laughed at the absurdity of correcting his manners at a time like this. Lily, my youngest at 18, curled up beside me. What does this mean for the company? For us? Nothing changes, I assured her. Your father made sure of that. The company is protected. Your inheritances are protected. Regina can't touch any of it. But she'll try, Sophia said. It wasn't a question. Probably. But we'll be ready. We talked until nearly dawn, my children processing their father's betrayal in their own ways. Sophia, ever practical, was already strategizing how to handle potential media fallout. Marcus wanted to confront Regina, to defend the family honor. Lily just cried, mourning the father she thought she'd known. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I stood on my balcony with a cup of coffee, thinking about the future. Simone Wares would survive this. My children would heal. I would find a way to move forward. But first, I had a company to protect. Monday morning came too quickly. I arrived at Simone Wares' headquarters at 7, an hour before most employees. The building, a converted warehouse in the arts district that Calvin and I had renovated together, felt different now. Every corner held memories tainted by lies. Mr. Caldwell was waiting in my office, looking tired but determined. I've been expecting this, he said without preamble. Calvin warned me Regina might make a play for the company. That's why he structured the will the way he did. You knew. I sank into my desk chair. About Adrian? I knew Calvin had made provisions for a child from a previous relationship. I didn't know the mother was Regina until she contacted me last month, fishing for information about the will. And you didn't think to warn me? He shifted uncomfortably. Attorney-client privilege. Calvin was my client. But I did urge him to tell you himself. He said he would, when the time was right. He ran out of time. Yes. Mr. Caldwell opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. But he did leave you protected. I've already filed injunctions preventing Regina from making any public statements about the will or Adrian's parentage without risking the forfeiture clause. She's effectively gagged. She won't stay quiet, I said. Not Regina. She's been planning this too long to give up now. Then we'll be ready. I've also taken the liberty of scheduling an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. The board needs to be informed of the situation before Regina tries to go around the legal channels. I spent the morning preparing for battle. Financial documents, proving my role in building Simone Ware's design portfolios showing my creative vision had driven the company's success. Testimonials from employees about my leadership. If Regina wanted a fight, she'd get one. The board meeting was tense. 12 faces stared at me around the conference table as I explained the situation. Some looked shocked, others calculating. These were Calvin's hand-picked advisors, but their loyalty had always been to the company's success, not personal drama. So there's no actual threat to ownership? Asked Patricia Chen, our longest-serving board member. None, Mr. Caldwell confirmed. The will is ironclad. Mrs. Cross maintains full control of Calvin's shares until and unless the conditions for Adrian's inheritance are met. Which won't happen, I added firmly. Simone Ware's is stronger than ever. Our latest collection sold 60% above projections. We have expansion plans for Tokyo and London. This company isn't failing, it's thriving. What about the public relations aspect? This from David Kumar, our newest board member. If this story gets out, we control the narrative, I interrupted. Calvin Cross was a man who made mistakes in his youth, but tried to make amends before his death. He provided for all his children while protecting the company he built with his wife. That's the story, if it comes to that. The board voted unanimously to support my continued leadership. As they filed out, Patricia lingered. I knew Calvin for 30 years, she said quietly. He was a good man who made bad choices. Don't let Regina paint him as a villain. And don't let her paint herself as a victim. That night, I found myself in Calvin's home office, going through his papers. I'd avoided this room since his death, unable to face the remnants of his daily life. But now I needed answers. I found them in a locked drawer of his desk. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Adrian but never sent. The earliest was dated just after Adrian's birth. My son, I held you today for the first time and last time. Your mother says it's better this way, that you'll have a simpler life without the complications of my presence. Maybe she's right. But know that I loved you from the moment I learned of your existence, and I will carry that love until my last breath. The letters continued through the years. First day of school. Little League championships. High school graduation. Each one a window into Calvin's guilt and love, his struggle between duty to the family he'd chosen and the son he'd hidden. The final letter was dated a week before his death. Adrian, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and the truth is finally out. I'm sorry. Those 2 words are inadequate for 20 years of absence, but they're all I have. I was a coward. I chose the easy path, the safe path, and in doing so, I denied you a father and denied myself a son. Your mother will tell you I abandoned you both. That's not entirely false, but it's not the whole truth either. I loved Regina once, but it was a selfish, immature love. What I built with Simone was real. Partnership, family, shared dreams made manifest. I couldn't give that up, but I couldn't let you go either. So I existed in between, neither fully present nor fully absent from your life. I've left you provided for, but I know money is a poor substitute for time. I've also protected Simone and the company we built, because she deserves that much after all my lies. Don't let your mother's bitterness poison you against Simone. She's a good woman who knew nothing of my betrayal. Live your life free of my shadows, Adrian. Be better than I was. Choose truth over comfort, courage over cowardice. And know that despite everything, you were loved. I sat back, tears streaming down my face. Even in death, Calvin was trying to control the narrative, to manage the fallout of his choices. But his words rang with genuine emotion. He had loved Adrian. He had loved me. He had simply lacked the courage to reconcile those loves honestly. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Without my mother. Adrian, I agreed to meet him the next morning at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, far from both Regina's Brentwood mansion and Simone Wares's Arts District headquarters. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over a laptop, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. Of course. He closed his laptop, revealing a folder underneath. I've been going through my mother's things. Looking for answers, I guess. I found these. He pushed the folder across the table. Inside were emails, printed and dated, between Regina and Calvin going back years. I skimmed them, my stomach turning. Regina's messages were manipulative masterpieces. Guilt trips about Adrian's needs, reminders of their past love, subtle threats about exposure. Calvin's responses were terse, businesslike, always including confirmation of money transferred. She blackmailed him, Adrian said flatly. All these years, I thought the money was voluntary child support. But it was extortion. Adrian. No, I need to say this. His hands clenched around his coffee cup. My whole life has been a lie. Every birthday gift from Uncle Calvin, every surprise appearance at my games, she orchestrated all of it. Forced him into it. I studied the young man across from me, seeing Calvin's determination mixed with something uniquely his own, a desire for truth at any cost. What do you want to do with this information? I asked. I want to make it right, he said. I want to refuse the trust fund. I want to publicly acknowledge that I have no claim on Simone Wares. I want to apologize for my mother's actions. You don't need to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. I've benefited from her schemes my entire life. Private schools, a car for my 16th birthday, college tuition, all paid for with money she extorted from your husband, from your family's business. You were a child. None of that was your fault. Maybe not. But I'm an adult now. I can choose differently. He pulled out another document. I've already drafted a statement renouncing any claim to Calvin's estate beyond what he legally left me. I want no part of my mother's plans. I read through his statement, impressed by its clarity and honesty. This will destroy your relationship with your mother. She destroyed it herself when she built it on lies. He laughed bitterly. Do you know what the worst part is? I actually loved Calvin. Not because he was my father. I didn't know that. I loved him because he was kind to me. He talked to me about business, about ethics, about building something meaningful with your life. Everything I learned about integrity, I learned from him. And the whole time, he was living the biggest lie of all. We're all complicated, I said gently. Calvin was a good man who made terrible choices. Your mother is a woman whose pain turned to poison. And you're a young man trying to find truth in a web of lies. That takes courage. Adrian nodded, wiping his eyes. I want to do more than just renounce the claim. I want to help you protect Simone Wares from whatever else my mother might be planning. Why would you do that? Because it's right. Because Calvin would want me to. Because... He paused, struggling for words. Because you were more of a parent to me than either of them ever were. You showed up to my science fairs and school plays because you wanted to, Not because you were guilt-tripped or blackmailed into it. You celebrated my successes and comforted my failures without any agenda except caring. I reached across the table and took his hand. You'll always be family to me, Adrian. Blood or no blood, lies or no lies. That hasn't changed. Even after everything. Especially after everything. You're not responsible for your parents' choices. You're only responsible for your own. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the strange new shape of our relationship. Then Adrian asked, "What do you think she'll do next?" "Your mother? She'll look for another angle. Regina doesn't give up easily. I might be able to help with that." He opened his laptop, showing me a series of emails. She's been corresponding with a journalist from the LA Times, promising an exclusive about the real story behind Simone Wears's success. My blood ran cold. When? The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, but I have access to her calendar. I could. No. I shook my head. No more lies, no more schemes. If Regina wants to go public, let her. We'll be ready with the truth. That night, I called an emergency meeting with my PR team. We worked until dawn crafting a response strategy, preparing statements, gathering documentation. If Regina wanted to play this out in public, we'd meet her on the battlefield of public opinion. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Patricia Chen's voice was tight with concern. "Have you seen the news?" I grabbed my tablet, pulling up the LA Times website. There it was, splashed across the business section. Fashion Empire's secret. Simone Wears founder's hidden son speaks out. But as I read, my confusion grew. This wasn't Regina's tell-all. It was Adrian's statement, released independently. He'd beaten his mother to the punch, telling his own story before she could spin it. The article was brutally honest. Adrian revealed his parentage, his mother's schemes, his own complicity in accepting benefits from the arrangement. But he also praised me and Simone Wears, renouncing any claim to the company and calling for focus to remain on the business Calvin and I had built together. "The sins of the fathers shouldn't destroy the work of the mothers," he was quoted as saying. Simone Cross is Simone Wears, and Simone Wears is the future of sustainable fashion. That's the only story that matters. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Reporters, board members, employees, friends, everyone wanted a statement, a reaction, something. But I had only one call to make. Regina answered on the first ring. "You turned my son against me." Her voice was raw, dangerous. "He turned himself toward the truth," I corrected. "Something you might try. I'll destroy you for this. You and your precious company." "No, Regina, you won't. Because Adrian just took away your power. The secret is out, and he's controlling the narrative. You can't blackmail the dead or extort the honest." I still have Calvin's letters. His promises to me. Evidence of your sham marriage. Then use them, I challenged. Show the world how you manipulated a man's guilt for 20 years. Explain how you waited until he was dead to make your move. See how that plays in the court of public opinion. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "I loved him." "I know," I said, surprising myself with the compassion in my voice. "So did I. But love isn't possession, Regina. It isn't manipulation or control. Calvin made his choices, wrong as they were. We both have to live with the consequences. Easy for you to say. You got the life, the name, the legacy. I got a husband who lied to me every day for 20 years. I got a best friend who was counting the days until she could steal what I'd built. I got 3 children who have to reconcile the father they loved with the man who betrayed their mother. You think any of that is easy? She hung up without another word. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of damage control and strategic planning. The media coverage was intense but surprisingly sympathetic, largely thanks to Adrian's honest approach. He did interviews, took responsibility, and consistently redirected focus to Simone Wares's mission and my leadership. Sales, surprisingly, went up. Our customer base, primarily women who valued both style and sustainability, rallied around the company. Orders poured in, along with messages of support. One customer wrote, "Behind every successful woman is a story of overcoming betrayal. Thank you for showing us how it's done with grace." Regina made one last attempt to salvage her plan. She filed a lawsuit challenging the will, claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. It lasted exactly 1 hearing before the judge dismissed it with prejudice, citing the clear forfeiture clause and Calvin's documented mental competency. As we left the courthouse, Regina approached me. She looked older, diminished, her perfect facade cracked beyond repair. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I'm surviving," I replied. "That's all any of us can do. I gave him 20 years of my life. So did I. The difference is, I built something with those years. You just waited for someone else's life to end." She walked away without another word. I never saw her again. Adrian, true to his word, refused the trust fund beyond his education expenses. He finished his degree at USC, then surprised everyone by applying to work at Simone Wares, not in management, but in our sustainability division, starting at entry level. "I want to earn my place," he told me. "No shortcuts, no nepotism. If I'm going to be part of this company's future, it'll be because I deserve it." He's been with us for 2 years now. His co-workers know his story. There's no hiding from Google, but they judge him on his work, which is exceptional. He has Calvin's business instincts but tempered with hard-won integrity. Last month, on the 3rd anniversary of Calvin's death, Adrian and I visited his grave together. My children had come earlier, leaving flowers and private messages. Adrian and I stood in comfortable silence, 2 people bound by a complicated history and a simpler present. "Do you think he knew?" Adrian asked eventually. "How it would all play out?" "I think he hoped for the best and prepared for the worst," I said. "He knew your mother. He knew me. He tried to protect everyone, which ended up hurting everyone. But we survived. We did more than survive. We chose truth over comfort, connection over bitterness. We chose to be better than the lies that made us." Adrian smiled, Calvin's smile, but his own too. "Thank you for everything." "Thank you," I replied, "for having the courage to break the cycle." We left together, driving back to Simone Wares where a new collection waited for final approval. The company had expanded to Tokyo and London as planned. We'd launched a mentorship program for young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds. The lies that had threatened to destroy us had instead forged us into something stronger. That night, I stood in my design studio, surrounded by fabric samples and sketches for our next collection. The theme was Renaissance, rebirth, renewal, emerging from darkness into light. It felt appropriate. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Family dinner Sunday? Marcus is bringing his girlfriend, and Lily has news about grad school." "Wouldn't miss it," I typed back. "Adrian too? Already invited. He's bringing dessert." I smiled, setting the phone aside and returning to my sketches. Family isn't always blood, Regina had once said. She'd meant it as manipulation, but like many lies, it contained a kernel of truth. Family is who shows up, who chooses truth over comfort, who builds rather than tears down. Calvin's betrayal had shattered my world. Regina's scheme had threatened to bury me in the rubble. But here I stood, in the company I'd built, surrounded by the family I'd chosen and who had chosen me in return. The past was written in scars, but the future was mine to design. I picked up my pencil and began to sketch, bringing new life to blank pages. Outside, Los Angeles glittered with possibility. Inside, I worked through the night, creating beauty from chaos, strength from betrayal, truth from lies. Because that's what survivors do. We take the broken pieces of our lives and we make something new, something better, something entirely our own. The next morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new designs to bring into the world. But tonight, in the quiet of my studio, I was exactly where I belonged. Not as Calvin's widow or Regina's victim, but as Simone Cross, designer, mother, survivor, and CEO of a company that no secret could destroy. The truth had set us all free. And freedom, I'd learned, was the most beautiful design of all. As dawn broke over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, I put the finishing touches on my sketch. A dress that flowed like water but stood strong as steel. Beautiful and practical. Elegant and ethical. Everything Simone wears stood for. Everything I stood for. My assistant would arrive soon, starting another day of meetings and decisions and forward motion. But for now, in the quiet between night and day, I allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable. I had protected what mattered most. I had chosen truth and grace over bitterness and revenge. And in the end, that made all the difference. The story could have ended differently. Regina could have won, destroying the company with her revelations. Adrian could have chosen his mother's path, fighting for money he hadn't earned. I could have let bitterness consume me, becoming another casualty of Calvin's lies. But we all chose differently. We chose to be better than the circumstances that created us. We chose connection over isolation, truth over manipulation, building over destroying. That's the real inheritance Calvin left behind. Not money or companies or secrets, but the opportunity to choose who we wanted to be in the face of betrayal. Regina chose bitterness. Adrian chose integrity. I chose resilience. And in those choices, we wrote our own endings. Mine is still being written, one sketch, one design, one day at a time. But I know now that whatever comes next, I'll face it with truth as my foundation and grace as my guide. Because that's what you do when life reveals that everything you believed was built on lies. You build something better on the truth. The fashion show was set for next month, our biggest yet. The Renaissance collection would debut in Paris, a triumphant return to the international stage after 3 years of carefully rebuilding our reputation. Every piece told a story of transformation, of beauty born from hardship. I was in my office reviewing the final lineup when my assistant knocked. "Simone, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." I looked up from my sketches. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Margaret Holt, Adrian's grandmother." My blood chilled. In all the drama with Regina, I'd forgotten she had family. "Send her in." Margaret Holt entered my office like a queen surveying a battlefield. She was in her 70s, impeccably dressed in vintage Chanel, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her eyes, Regina's eyes, Adrian's eyes, assessed me with sharp intelligence. "Mrs. Cross," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. I believe we need to talk. If you're here to plead Regina's case, I'm here to apologize. The words stopped me cold. My daughter has brought shame to our family name. I've spent the last month cleaning up her messes, paying off the journalists she tried to bribe, managing the social fallout. I'm exhausted. I studied her carefully. Why come to me? Because Adrian asked me to. She pulled out a letter, worn from reading. He wrote to me, explaining everything. How you've treated him with more kindness than he deserved. How you've allowed him to earn his place at Simone Ware's. How you've shown more grace than my own daughter ever could. Adrian is a good young man. He is now. Thanks to you. She leaned forward. I failed Regina. I raised her to believe she deserved things simply for wanting them. When she had Adrian, I thought motherhood would teach her sacrifice, patience, love. Instead, she used him as a weapon. Mrs. Holt. Margaret, please. She sighed. I know what Calvin meant to her. First love, grand passion, all of that. But she could never accept that he'd chosen someone else. She spent 20 years living in a fantasy where someday he'd leave you for her. And when he died, the fantasy died too. All she had left was revenge. Margaret reached into her purse, pulling out a small velvet box. This was my mother's. Regina was supposed to inherit it, but I can't. I won't reward what she's done. I'd like Adrian to have it, to give to someone someday who understands that love is about building, not destroying. She placed the box on my desk. Inside was an Art Deco diamond brooch, exquisite in its simplicity. It's beautiful, I said. But I can't. You can and you will. Consider it a small reparation for what my family has put you through. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I've cut Regina off financially. She'll have to live on what she's saved, find her own way. Perhaps struggle will teach her what privilege couldn't. That seems harsh. Margaret's smile was sad. Is it harsher than what she tried to do to you? She would have destroyed your life's work out of spite. At least I'm giving her the chance to build something of her own. She moved toward the door, then paused. Adrian doesn't know I'm here. I'd prefer to keep it that way. Let him continue believing he's earning his place on his own merits. He is earning it. I know. That's what makes it so remarkable. She met my eyes one last time. You've raised a fine son, Mrs. Cross. Better than his biological parents deserved. After she left, I sat staring at the brooch, thinking about the strange ways families form and reform. Margaret Holt had just claimed me as Adrian's true parent, had acknowledged what Regina never could, that family is about showing up, not showing off. The weeks leading to Paris were a blur of fittings, rehearsals, and final adjustments. Adrian threw himself into the sustainability campaign, creating a documentary about our ethical manufacturing process that would screen alongside the show. My children rallied around the event, Sophia managing logistics, Marcus handling security, Lily designing the invitations. It's like Dad never left, Lily said one evening as we worked late in the studio. We're all here, doing what he would have wanted. No, I corrected gently. We're doing what we want. That's the difference. The night before we left for Paris, I found Adrian in the archive room, studying old sketches from Simone Ware's early days. Nervous? I asked. Terrified, he admitted. What if they see me as the scandal kid? What if my presence overshadows the collection? Then we deal with it together, like family does. He smiled, but something shadowed his eyes. I heard from Mom yesterday. I waited, letting him choose his words. She's in Scottsdale, working at a boutique. She wanted money, of course, but also... He shrugged. She wanted to know if I'd spoken to you. If you ever mentioned her. What did you tell her? The truth. That we don't waste time on the past when we're building the future. He touched one of my earliest sketches, a dress I'd designed when Simone Wears was just a dream. She didn't take it well. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm learning that some people are lessons, not lifetime commitments. He looked at me. Thank you for teaching me the difference. Paris was everything we'd dreamed and more. The venue, a restored Belle Époque theatre, provided the perfect backdrop for our Renaissance theme. Fashion editors, buyers, and influencers packed the seats. The documentary Adrian had created played on screens throughout the space, showing the faces and stories behind each garment. Backstage was controlled chaos. Models dressed in flowing silks and structured jackets that told stories of transformation. Each piece was named for a woman who'd overcome betrayal to build something lasting. Cleopatra, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Frida Kahlo. My favorite was the finale dress, Phoenix, made from recycled materials that had been burned and reformed into something entirely new. 5 minutes, the stage manager called. I found my children in the wings. Sophia wore a suit from our professional line. Marcus looked uncomfortable but proud in his tux, and Lily sparkled in a dress she'd helped design. Dad would be so proud, Sophia said, squeezing my hand. Of all of us, I agreed. The lights dimmed. Music swelled, a modern remix of classical pieces, another kind of Renaissance. The first model stepped onto the runway, and I held my breath. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of beauty and precision. Each look built on the last, telling the story of destruction and rebirth, of women who refused to be defined by the men who'd betrayed them. The audience was silent, absorbed, occasionally gasping at particularly stunning pieces. When Phoenix appeared, the finale dress in crimson silk that seemed to move like flame, the theater erupted. The model paused at the end of the runway, and in that moment, I saw everything the dress represented. Beauty from ashes. Strength from sorrow. Truth from lies. The applause was thunderous. Models filed out for the finale walk, and then it was my turn. I'd chosen a simple black dress from our classic line, letting the collection speak for itself. But as I walked that runway, seeing faces that had supported Simone Wears through scandal and success, I felt anything but simple. I was a widow who'd discovered her husband's deepest betrayal. A woman whose best friend had tried to destroy her. A mother protecting her children's legacy. A designer pouring her pain into beauty. A survivor who'd chosen grace over bitterness. I was all of these things and none of them. I was simply Simone Cross, standing in the light, surrounded by the beautiful things we'd built from broken pieces. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Backstage, my team celebrated with champagne and tears. Orders were already pouring in. The documentary was trending worldwide. Hashtag Simone Wears Renaissance was the top hashtag in fashion. But the moment that mattered most came later, at the after-party. Adrian found me on a balcony overlooking the Seine, needing a moment of quiet after the chaos. We did it, he said simply. You did it, I corrected. That documentary changed everything. It made the clothes about more than fashion. It made them about values. I learned from the best. He pulled out a small box. I have something for you. Inside was a necklace, a phoenix pendant in recycled gold, set with ethically sourced rubies. Adrian, this is too much. It's not enough. Not for everything you've given me. A chance. A family. A future that isn't built on lies. He helped me fasten it around my neck. Besides, I used my first bonus to buy it. Earned money, not inherited. We stood together watching the lights of Paris reflect on the water. Somewhere in this city, Regina was probably reading about our triumph, tasting the bitterness of what she'd thrown away. Calvin lay in his grave, his secrets finally powerless. But here on this balcony, his widow and his son had found something neither betrayal nor death could destroy. What's next? Adrian asked. Tokyo next month. London in the spring. The Sustainability Summit in Copenhagen. I smiled. The future. And Regina? Regina made her choice. She chose revenge over redemption, bitterness over building. She'll have to live with that. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she'd chosen differently? I considered the question. She could have been part of this. Could have watched you succeed on your own merits. Could have kept my friendship and your respect. But some people can't see past their own pain to the possibilities beyond it. You did. I had more to lose. And more to save. I touched the Phoenix pendant. Your father's betrayal could have destroyed everything we built. Regina's scheme could have finished the job. But instead, it forced us all to choose who we really wanted to be. And who are we? I looked at this young man who'd become family in the truest sense, who'd chosen integrity over easy money, truth over comfortable lies. We're the ones who build beautiful things from broken pieces, I said. We're the ones who choose light over darkness, creation over destruction. We're the phoenixes, Adrian. All of us. The party continued below, but we stayed on the balcony a while longer, aunt and nephew by choice if not by blood, survivors of other people's secrets, builders of our own truths. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The fashion world was fickle, and success was never guaranteed. There would be other collections to design, other shows to stage, other mountains to climb. But tonight, in the City of Light, we'd proven that betrayal didn't have to be the end of the story. It could be the beginning of something stronger, truer, more beautiful than anything built on lies. The phoenix had risen. And she was just getting started. As we finally headed back to the party, Adrian asked one last question. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Calvin and Mom. I paused at the door, considering. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about me. About not carrying the weight of their choices anymore. I smiled. So yes, I forgive them. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean allowing them to hurt us again. It just means choosing to build something beautiful despite the pain they caused. That's very philosophical. That's very fashionable, I corrected. Taking raw materials, even damaged ones, and transforming them into something extraordinary. That's what we do. In clothing and in life. We rejoined the celebration, where my children were holding court with fashion editors, where my team was fielding order requests, where the future of Simone Wears was being written one conversation at a time. I thought of Calvin, of the life we'd built and the lies he'd hidden. I thought of Regina, alone in Arizona, surrounded by the ashes of her schemes. I thought of all the ways this story could have ended, in destruction, in bitterness, in the collapse of everything I'd worked to build. But sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's success. Sometimes it's grace. Sometimes it's taking the broken pieces of your life and building something so beautiful that the pain becomes just another color in the palette, another texture in the design. The party went on until dawn, Paris celebrating with us as only Paris could. And when the sun rose over the Seine, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, I stood surrounded by family, blood and chosen, planned and unexpected, knowing that the best designs come from the hardest struggles. Simone Wears had risen from the ashes of betrayal. We'd transformed pain into beauty, lies into truth, destruction into creation. We were phoenixes, all of us. And this was just the beginning. Thank you so much for watching this emotional journey with me today. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of your own strength, or simply kept you company, then I'm grateful you stayed until the end. Remember, like Simone, we all have the power to rise from our ashes and build something beautiful from broken pieces. You are stronger than any betrayal, bigger than any secret, and worthy of a life built on truth. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Comment below. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? How did you find your strength? Share this with someone who needs to hear that they can rise again. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring you more powerful, emotional stories every week. Until next time, remember, you are the author of your own story. Make it a masterpiece. With love and gratitude, Voices of Gracia.